the truth about this case they don't want you to know. It only took communists about 9 days to engineer George Floyd's death, to loot and torch Minneapolis, to shut down the Minneapolis Police Department, and to start race riots across America. They pulled another Jussie Smollett, and the world fell for it. There's body cam footage from rookie officer Thomas Lane that was leaked 2 months after Floyd's death, which proves that this was not a racist murder, but that Floyd was high, he was belligerent, and he resisted arrest for over 10 minutes. The autopsy showed he did not die from asphyxiation or trauma, but that he died from heart failure due to lethal levels of fentanyl, heroin, and meth that were in his system. So why did they do this? They do it so communists can build a huge corridor of new public housing on Lake Street for absentee ballot mills. They want to control the vote in Minnesota, specifically from Hennepin County, dismantle the police department, and push through cheat by mail for the Democrats. CARE, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, Black Bloc, the Youth Liberation Front, Occupy Wall Street, Sojourners, they're all front organizations for the Communist Party in the United States. They operate liberal activist groups, fake religious groups, social justice groups, and mercenaries whose goal is the overthrow of America. AG Barr just declared left-wing Antifa a terrorist organization. It's a militant group. It was started in 1932 by the Communist Party of Germany and has since infiltrated and overtaken many other organizations in America. George Floyd had prior connections to Keith Ellison, prior connections to Mayor Jacob Frey, to Hollywood, CARE, Derek Chauvin, and Amy Klobuchar. Keith Ellison, by the way, is the de facto CARE leader and Antifa leader in Minnesota, and Ilhan Omar is one of his creations. Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar even use the same campaign manager, known for his expertise in foreign money handling. His name is Tim Minette. Ilhan Omar even married Tim Minette for special privilege after she married her gay brother for immigration fraud. Ellison's son, Jeremiah, who runs the Minneapolis City Council, just pledged his allegiance to Antifa and his plan to shut down the police department to replace it with community outreach. Keith Ellison is good friends with the leader of Portland's Rose City Antifa, Luis Enrique Marquez, who flies the communist flag. Ellison converted to Islam in law school. He was a student of Farrakhan. He once defended cop killers. He called for reparations and a separate country for black people within America. He wrote many racist articles under the name of Keith Hakeem Muhammad X. He, of course, changed his name when he ran for office in Minnesota and has since become the state's attorney general. George Floyd and Derek Chauvin knew each other. They worked security together at a Latino restaurant called El Nuevo Rodeo on Lake Street and 27th in Minneapolis. The face of that restaurant, Maya Santamaria, with a history of problems, ran the business for the Sabri family, who want to develop Lake Street for the refugee community as an extension of Cedar Riverside. Santamaria and Frey, by the way, are very good friends. Sabri is from Jordan. He's the developer behind the Somali Mall on East Lake Street and wants to build another Somali Mall on East Lake Street. His projects are backed by Ellison, Omar, and Frey. He's long wanted to build condos on Lake Street, but has been turned down. Sundance reports that El Nuevo Rodeo restaurant is likely a money laundering and counterfeit money front for the Sabri family that was forced to close during COVID. El Nuevo was looted during the riots. Omar Investments, Inc. has owned El Nuevo Rodeo Cantina and nightclub since 1996. The principal of Omar Investments, Inc. is Muna Sabri. Follow me here. In 2001, Basim Sabri was captured by the FBI in a sting operation. The Sabris are a very wealthy family with a history of bribing Minneapolis city officials, which is proven by Basim Sabri, who claimed that Abdi Warsami, who sits on Ellison's Minneapolis City Council, actually took bribes from him. Born in Somalia, Warsami was brought to Minnesota from London by who other than George Soros. He was brought here to master the absentee ballot vote in Minnesota and flip it blue. He began by running Cedar Riverside and turning it into a ballot-making machine, which elected Ilhan Omar and Keith Ellison. He succeeded in controlling a vote in Minnesota through voter fraud and third-party ringers. Derek Chauvin worked at El Nuevo Rodeo for 17 years. That puts Chauvin showing up to work security at El Nuevo Rodeo right after the FBI busted Basim Sabri. Chauvin received a commendation medal after he arrested violent gang members outside of El Nuevo Rodeo in 2008. Members of CARE filmed George Floyd's death outside of Cup Foods in Minneapolis and erected a huge portrait of Floyd on the street. They wore Black Lives Matter shirts and handed out sambusas, stuffed pastries, to mourners in Elliott Park in Minneapolis. It took Fry 4 days to respond to the riots after the entire city had been looted and burned. But within 6 hours, he planned a press conference on the Floyd death. There's body cam footage from all 4 officers which we have never seen. Only the cell phone video from a complete stranger and the cup food surveillance video from a man who's anti-American, anti-police, and works for Black Lives Matter. The first 2 officers on the scene when called from Cup Foods about George Floyd passing a counterfeit bill were rookies, each with less than 4 shifts as police officers. It was his 4th day as a police officer when Thomas Lane pulled his weapon on George Floyd and asked him to put his hands on the steering wheel of that car. Lane asked Floyd if he was on something because there was foam coming out of his mouth. Floyd mumbled, "I can't breathe." J. Alexander King, 26 years old, is a rookie cop who was working his 3rd shift ever as a police officer when he encountered George Floyd. He stood on the passenger side of Floyd's car while Lane held a gun on him. King, who identifies as African American, now faces 40 years in prison for the so-called racist murder of a fellow African American. Chauvin and his partner showed up late to the scene, but helped the 2 rookies try to maneuver Floyd into the patrol car, and they failed. Chauvin pulled him to the ground and kneeled on him. Conspiracy theorists believe the man who kneeled on Floyd wasn't really Derek Chauvin, but a stand-in. Look at a photo of Chauvin 2 years ago with his wife, a Laos refugee who ran for Mrs. Minnesota in 2018, and then the photo of the original mugshot compared to the kneeler. You decide. Not only was Chauvin employed by El Nuevo Rodeo for 17 years, but he and his wife are real estate agents. They own a home in Minnesota, they own a home in Florida, they're residents of Florida, and run an Airbnb there. Up until last week, Chauvin's wife said he was the most gentle man she's ever known. Now she's filed for divorce and said he's a murderer. Quite a shift in such a short period of time. Even more confusing, the media is now claiming that Chauvin is a Republican who committed voter fraud while being a Florida resident. Think about that latest spin to tie Trump and Republicans to Chauvin's actions. George Floyd had sickle cell anemia and heart disease. He had lethal levels of fentanyl and heroin in his body, as well as meth, speed, and marijuana at the time of his death. No one mentions that, not at all. The autopsy says he died at 9:25 p.m. after he was transported to the hospital. No one mentions that, not at all. Sickle cell anemia reduces oxygen to your brain and tissues and lowers life expectancy by over 20 years in a healthy individual. Fentanyl slows oxygen to your brain, and both meth and speed can cause cardiac arrest. The autopsy was performed on May 26th, but the actual report wasn't released to the public until days later, after cities were torched and burned. The toxicology report was complete on May 31st, but the results were quietly released to the public on June 4th. Floyd tested positive for COVID 2 months ago, so he did not die from that. He's recovered and had antibodies, the fake narrative to cover for the drugs. Floyd held a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach while ransacking her home for money and drugs in Texas in 2007. He served 5 years for prison for armed robbery. He came to Minnesota in 2014 when he got out. How did he get a job working security with Chauvin? Who did that background check? George Floyd was a porn star. His screen name was Big Floyd, and his work appeared on Middle Eastern porn sites called Habib. Klobuchar declined to prosecute Derek Chauvin for a police shooting that took place in 2006 that went to a grand jury. He was later cleared. So she knew who he was. If people think communists wouldn't drug, murder, or pay someone to be a patsy to start a race riot, to get rid of the police, engineer a murder for the cameras, you need to get out in the real world. Within 24 hours of Floyd's death, thousands of rioters looted and torched Minneapolis while the police stood down and let it burn. It didn't just happen. On the day the riot started, Mayor Fry had just mandated masks for everyone, and the first looting happened at a Target store right near Cedar Riverside. It was looted, but not torched. How convenient. All of the rioters were wearing masks. Target store is a retail operation founded by the liberal Dayton family, the same family of Minnesota's previous Democrat Governor Mark Dayton, immediately donated to Black Lives Matter and shut down all their stores to escape further damage. Coincidence? CARE organized the looters, Antifa organized the arsonists. When asked why he allowed rioters to loot in large groups but banned churches from worshiping in large groups, Governor Walz had no answer. How do communists overthrow a city, a country? They engineer a murder, start a race war, loot it, burn it down, and then get you to blame yourself. Turn over your guns, kiss their feet, and beg to be taken care of. You got it?